Hi, this is Walter with Yellowstone Country Fly Fishing with my fly tying video for, I guess this is May 22nd, 2025. And the reason I'm doing this one, which is a glasshead soft hackle pheasant tail, also known as a Firehole Pheasant Tail, is because the Firehole River is going to be opening here in 2 days in Yellowstone Park. And this is my best fly on the Firehole River. In fact, this is the first fly I came up with once I started working out here back in 2001. And used it primarily on the Firehole then. First couple seasons I started guiding, and still use it primarily on the Firehole. This pattern alone probably accounts for roughly a third of my trout on the Firehole River. It's a caddis, it's a caddis soft hackle, caddis emerger soft hackle. And the key advantage here is you can fish this any way you want. When I first started, I didn't really know how to swing wet flies, and so I tended to fish it under a small indicator, and actually fairly shallow, just fishing it in the pockets and the riffles, but under an indicator. You can also fish it as a stream or behind a streamer. This first week of the season, when the water's a little murkier, you can actually get some big fish on the Firehole on streamers. Throw one of these on as your kind of numbers fly behind that streamer. And of course it works great swung as a soft hackle. That's how I primarily fish it nowadays. Also works very well underneath a dry fly. You get a caddis hatch of either the Mother's Day caddis, Brachicentris, which will still be hatching on the Firehole a little bit, or the white miller caddis, the Nectopsyche, which is the most important caddis. That's the kind of blonde fluttery one. Fish this as a dropper behind your dry, and they'll crush it. And this is a 16. That's the most important color. And it's, trust me, if you need to fish the Firehole, if you're going to be fishing the Firehole, you need to have this fly. Okay, so to get started here, my hook is a size 16 1XL nymph hook with a translucent kind of amber iris bead, I believe it's called. And this is the same bead I used on the caddis pupa I did a few weeks ago. And I've strung a few of those onto a piece of gold wire here, so you can really see how bright those are, and kind of hopefully get a sense of the kind of iridescence of that bead. I really do think the bead matters on this fly. I've tied some of these with brass or tungsten beads and caught very few fish on them. The glass bead is much more effective. Then my thread is going to be 8/0 brown, and whatever brand you like. And you could even go a little smaller if you wanted. I wouldn't go any larger, but there's nothing really on this fly that's going to, require a lot of thread tension, so you can go as light as you've got. And I've started that slightly behind the bead here, and in fact, I'm going to redo that and start it even further back. And the reason I'm doing that is because I'm going to be tying in my soft hackle here at the beginning, using my soft hackles with larger feathers technique. And the feather I've got here, this is a kind of a brown speckled hen feather, hen chicken, and this one's off of a barnyard bird, but the commercial product that you'll be able to find that does this is a India henback, kind of a speckled India henback. And then you can also do the same thing basically with a Coq de Leon. I believe it's a hen saddle from Whiting if you really want to go fancy. But I'm going to strip off a pretty good number of those fibers. This is a 16, and I do tie this fly primarily in a 16, occasionally in a 14. But I like a fairly heavy hackle on it, and so my bundle of fibers is going to look about like that. And I'm going to trim the butt ends of those off, and because I strip those rather than cut them. And then I'm going to tie those in facing forward over the eye. And again, this is identical if you watch my other videos. And I want those about the length of the shank where I tie them in. So I'm going to use thread pressure to spin those. So just kind of a light gathering wrap here, just to kind of spread those around the hook like that. And that one didn't really spin very well. And if they don't work, you can kind of just back it off like I did there, because that one really didn't spin very well. It still hasn't spun very well. This feather I grabbed is up pretty high on the back of the bird, and those feathers almost had a little bit of fibers that are sticking together like on a traditional wet fly wing, so that's why I had so much trouble with that. So anyhow, I'm going to go ahead and wrap back to the bend of the hook, and I'm not too worried about those little stragglers there. And maybe a little ahead of the bend, actually. And then my wing on this fly is going to be, or my body, I'm sorry, is going to be standard ringneck pheasant, kind of natural pheasant. And I'm very, very particular about how many I use on this particular fly. So as long as you're coming off kind of the middle of the feather here, where I'm getting these, you're going to want to use 3 of these, 3 fibers on a size 16 like this. Now, if you're using the feathers from the more of the base of the, or the fibers from the base of the feather, like down here, those are a little finer, and so you can use 4 of those. You can kind of see I've gotten some off of this portion of the feather and then some off this portion of the feather, and up here I'm using 3. I'm going to cut the tips off those fibers and then just tie those in at the back of the hook with just 1 or 2 wraps. And then my rib on this fly is going to be extra small gold wire. Now normally when I'm tying a pheasant tail, I like to use wire that's the same color as the bead, and so I tend to use copper beads on pheasant tails, and so I'll use a copper wire as well. On this one I definitely prefer the gold. I think it's that little bit of extra flash from the gold, because I'm using a very, very fine wire here, and so it kind of disappears into the body anyway. I'm going to tie that in with touching turns up the hook shank, and basically a bead width or bead length behind the wing is where I want to stop and tie in my thorax. All right, so the next thing here, I'm going to apply some super glue to that underbody to create a little more durability. And I'm going to grab my pheasant tail, take 1 turn behind that wire to keep the wire from sliding off if things start getting bedraggled. And then I'm just going to wrap that up the hook shank. You see, this is going to make a very, very fine body. I like a pretty fine body on this fly. That's why I only use the 3 fibers. And again, 1 or 2 turns is plenty. And you notice there my wing was kind of or my hackle was wanting to get mixed in with the pheasant tail, and so what I did is I put my scissor tips together, slid them up, and that's how I popped those fibers out. Then I'm going to make about 6 turns up the hook shank here, maybe 7. I don't really keep track. Some of them wind up with a little more gold wire, some a little less. But you can see there, that's a very fine wire, and so that kind of disappears almost into the pheasant. This actually doesn't look that different from a thread-bodied soft hackle with a wire rib, because that pheasant tail body is so fine. All right, and then my thorax on this fly is going to be a couple peacock curl strands, and you can use fairly ratty ones for this, because this is just going to kind of disappear in there. So I've got 2 of them there. I'm going to tie that in, and on this one, I usually like to wrap my peacock curl over a base of super glue, and that's my reinforcement. But if I wind up putting super glue in here, that's obviously going to get into the hackle, and I don't want that. So what I'm going to do instead is just kind of line up my thread with that peacock and going to make a chenille out of it. And I really only do this when I'm making thoraxes like this, because I think it does bind down a few of those fibers, and I think it just looks better when I wrap it without wrapping over the thread first. But again, this is more for the iridescence and the color. That peacock's basically going to disappear. And then what I wind up doing when I get up to the hackle is I wind up kind of making another maybe quarter turn, and that's when I tie it off. And I actually do tie it off. You don't just want to rely on the thread wraps you've made to turn it sort of into a chenille. All right, and then final step here is I'm going to sweep back those fibers and just make, 2 or 3 turns right in front, and then get my whip finisher and then make 2 3-turn whip finishes. I do not use head cement at the front of this fly, just because of the danger of matting down that hackle. And there you have it. That's a glasshead soft hackle pheasant tail, Firehole killer. And if you see me on the Firehole River here, between now and the middle of June, I will be using this fly, me or my clients. And you can fish that any way you like. Works great, and certainly recommend trying it anywhere else that you have, caddis or fish that just like soft hackles. As always, thanks for watching, and you can click the Buy Me a Coffee link or book a guided trip if you want to support my business, and I will see you next time.